Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the great crystal chamber, her hands bound with glowing chains that felt warm against her wrists. The Zephyrian High Council sat in a circle around her, their tall blue bodies draped in flowing robes that seemed to move like water. Each alien wore a mask made of polished metal that reflected the strange light coming from the crystal walls. She had been here for 3 days now. 3 days since they found her in their sacred temple with the ancient tablets. 3 days since they accused her of the worst crime possible in their society, touching the holy words that only their priests could read. Elena looked around the chamber. The walls rose high above her head, covered in symbols that glowed soft blue in the darkness. She recognized some of them from her work as a language expert. Others were completely new to her. But she had seen these symbols before. In the ruins on Kepler-442c, the largest of the Zephyrians rose from his seat. This was Kethmar, the high priest. His staff was taller than Elena herself, made from some kind of black stone that seemed to absorb light. Silver symbols ran down its length, and at the top sat a crystal that pulsed with inner fire. "Human," Kethmar said, his voice deep and musical. "You have committed the greatest sin against the divine order. You have touched the sacred tablets with your unworthy hands. You have looked upon words that were written by the gods themselves." Elena said nothing. She had tried to explain 3 days ago when they first brought her here. They had not listened then. They would not listen now. "The punishment for your crime is death," Kethmar continued. "But first you must hear the words of judgment in the first tongue, the language of creation itself. You will not understand them, but the gods will know that justice has been done." The other council members began to hum, a low sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Kethmar raised his staff high above his head. The crystal at its top blazed with white light. Then he began to speak. The words that came from his mouth were unlike anything Elena had heard in any alien language. They were old, ancient, with a rhythm that reminded her of something she could not quite remember. The sounds rolled across the chamber like thunder, each word clear and powerful, but as Kethmar continued, Elena felt something strange happen. The words began to make sense. Not all of them, but enough. She recognized patterns, structures, sounds that her mind connected to languages she had studied for years. Her eyes went wide. This could not be possible. Kethmar spoke of judgment and punishment, of divine law and sacred order. But he was making mistakes. Small ones, but mistakes nonetheless. He was using the wrong form of a verb here, the wrong ending there. It was like listening to someone speak Latin who had only read it in books. Elena tried to stay quiet, but the mistakes kept coming. Finally, she could not hold back anymore. "You are speaking it wrong," she said. The humming stopped. Every face in the chamber turned toward her. Kethmar froze with his staff still raised. "What did you say?" he whispered. Elena took a deep breath. Then she spoke in the same language Kethmar had been using, but with the correct forms, the proper pronunciation. "I said you are speaking it wrong. The verb form should be thekai, not theko. And the blessing you just spoke, you said it backward. It should be Maltith Kira Netham Taler, not Maltith Taler Netham Kira. The way you said it, you are asking the gods to curse us, not bless us." The chamber was completely silent. Elena could hear her own heart beating. Then she continued, speaking the ancient words with perfect pronunciation. She completed the ritual that Kethmar had started, but she spoke it correctly, with the right rhythm and the proper forms. The words seemed to flow from her mouth like water from a spring. She spoke of justice and truth, of seeking wisdom rather than revenge. She spoke of the need to understand before passing judgment. The ancient language felt natural on her tongue, as if she had spoken it all her life. When she finished, the silence stretched on and on. Kethmar's staff fell from his hands. The black stone hit the crystal floor with a sound like breaking glass. The high priest staggered backward, his mask sliding from his face to reveal features twisted with shock and confusion. "Impossible," he whispered. And Elena understood this word too. Though he spoke it in his own language, the other council members began to speak all at once, their voices rising in fear and amazement. Elena caught fragments of their words. They were asking how she could know the first tongue. They were wondering if she was some kind of divine messenger. Some thought she must be a demon sent to trick them, but Kethmar was staring at Elena with eyes that seemed to see right through her. His blue skin had gone pale, and his hands were shaking. How? He asked, switching back to the common language they used for trading between species. How do you know the first tongue? It is the language of the gods. Only the highest priests learn even a few words. I have studied it for 50 years, and you speak it like a native speaker, Elena finished for him. Yes, I know. She looked around the chamber at all the shocked faces watching her. These people had built their entire religion around this language. They believed it was given to them by gods. They had no idea what it really was. I know where this language comes from, Elena said quietly. And you are not going to like the answer. Kethmar bent down slowly and picked up his staff with trembling hands. When he looked at Elena again, she saw something new in his eyes. It was not anger or fear, it was curiosity. Tell me, he said. Elena smiled sadly. It is going to change everything you believe about your people and your gods. Are you sure you want to know? Kethmar was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the other council members waited. The crystal wall seemed to pulse with anticipation. Finally, the high priest nodded. Yes, he said. I want to know the truth. 3 months earlier, Elena had been standing in a very different place. Instead of a crystal chamber, she was surrounded by red dirt and broken stones under the pale light of 2 small suns. The planet Kepler 442c was hot and dry. With air that tasted like metal and dust, her team had been digging here for 6 weeks, following signals from their deep scanners. The machines had found something buried under the ground, something old and artificial. Elena hoped it would be just another set of ruins from some long-dead civilization. She had studied dozens of them across the galaxy. She was wrong. Dr. Vasquez, called Marcus Chun, one of her graduate students. He was kneeling by a hole they had dug that morning, his brush moving carefully across something dark in the dirt. You need to see this. Elena walked over, wiping sweat from her forehead. The heat on this planet never seemed to get easier. She knelt down next to Marcus and looked into the hole. What she saw made her forget all about the heat. It was a tablet made of some kind of black stone, about the size of a dinner plate. Symbols covered its surface in neat rows, carved deep into the rock. But these were not like any alien writing Elena had ever seen. The shapes, the way they were arranged, the mathematical precision of the spacing, it all reminded her of something. It looks almost like, she started to say, then stopped. It was too crazy to even think. Like what? Marcus asked. Elena shook her head. Help me get it out of there. Carefully, we need to see the whole thing. It took them 2 hours to free the tablet from the earth. When they finally lifted it up, Elena saw that the backside was covered with symbols too. These were different from the front, more complex, with small marks that looked almost like punctuation. Take pictures, Elena said. Document everything. Then we take this back to the ship. That night, Elena sat in her small cabin on the research vessel, staring at the images on her computer screen. The symbols from the tablet glowed green in the artificial light. She had run them through every translation program she had, but nothing came up. This was a completely unknown language, but it was not completely unfamiliar. Elena had spent 15 years studying ancient human languages. She knew cuneiform from Mesopotamia, hieroglyphics from Egypt, and dozens of other writing systems that humans had used thousands of years ago. This tablet reminded her of cuneiform, but it was different. More advanced. More precise. She worked through the night, comparing the symbols to everything in her database. By morning, she had found 17 clear connections to proto-human writing systems. Not direct matches, but similarities in structure and style that were too close to be coincidence. The next day, they found more tablets. Over the following weeks, Elena's team uncovered an entire library buried in the red dirt. Hundreds of stone tablets, all covered with the same precise symbols. Some were small, others as large as dinner tables. A few were made of different materials, metal that did not rust, crystal that still caught the light perfectly. Elena threw herself into the work of translation. She barely slept, barely ate. The symbols were starting to make sense, but what they revealed was impossible. The tablets were not just random writings. They were organized, purposeful. Some contained star charts that showed the locations of nearby solar systems with perfect accuracy. Others held mathematical formulas that were far beyond what any primitive civilization should have known, but the most shocking discovery came when Elena started to understand the grammar. The language on the tablets followed patterns that were almost identical to ancient human languages. The way verbs were formed, the structure of sentences, even the symbols used for numbers. All of it pointed to a connection with Earth. Elena tried to tell herself she was seeing things. It had to be coincidence. Parallel evolution of language, nothing more. But the evidence kept piling up. Then she found the tablet that changed everything. It was smaller than the others, made of smooth white stone that felt warm to the touch. The symbols on it were different too, more flowing, almost like handwriting instead of formal carved text. Elena worked on it for days before she realized what she was looking at. It was not a formal document or a star chart. It was a journal, someone's personal record of their experiences, and as she translated it, Elena began to understand that the someone was human. The journal told the story of a group of explorers from Earth who had come to this region of space over 50,000 years ago. They had found a young alien species on a nearby world, the ancestors of the Zephyrians. These early aliens were intelligent but primitive, still living in caves and hunting with simple tools. The human explorers had made contact. They had shared knowledge, taught the aliens about writing and mathematics and astronomy. They had even learned the aliens' simple language and taught them words from Earth. Over time, a trade language developed, a mix of human and alien words that both species could use. The humans wrote down the rules of this language on stone tablets so that future visitors could communicate with the aliens, but something went wrong. The journal's final entry spoke of a plague, some kind of disease that was killing the human explorers. They had to leave quickly, taking most of their technology with them. The tablets were left behind as a gift to their alien friends. The last entry was heartbreaking. The human explorer wrote about how the aliens had started to think of the trade language as sacred, given to them by gods from the sky. The humans had tried to explain that they were not gods, just travelers from another world. But the aliens did not understand. Elena sat back in her chair, staring at the translated text on her screen. If this journal was real, then the Zephyrian first tongue was not divine at all. It was a trade language created by human explorers 50,000 years ago, and if that was true, then Elena had just discovered evidence of ancient human space travel that predated everything historians thought they knew. She looked at the pile of tablets on her desk. There were hundreds more to translate. Star charts that might show where those ancient humans had gone. Technical manuals that could reveal lost technology. Maybe even clues about what had happened to the explorers. Elena picked up her brush and started working on the next tablet. She had no idea that her discovery would soon put her life in danger, or that the peaceful aliens they traded with had built an entire religion around those long ago human visitors. All she knew was that human history was much more interesting than anyone had ever imagined. Elena spent the next hour telling her story to the stunned High Council. She spoke slowly and clearly, using simple words so there could be no misunderstanding. She told them about the tablets, about the journal, about the human explorers who had come to their world 50,000 years ago. Cathmore listened without speaking. His face showed no emotion, but Elena could see his hands trembling as he gripped his staff. The other council members whispered among themselves, their voices growing louder as Elena continued. When she finished, the chamber fell into silence again. Finally, one of the council members stood up. Elena recognized him as Veltar, the second priest. His voice shook with anger as he spoke. "Lies," he said. "All of it. This human speaks blasphemy to save her own life. The first tongue was given to us by the Divine Ones. It has been so since the beginning of time. Several other council members nodded in agreement. Elena had expected this reaction. The Zephyrian religion was built around the idea that they were chosen by the gods to receive the sacred language. Her discovery threatened everything they believed, but Kethmer held up his hand for silence. "The human speaks the first tongue better than any priest in this chamber," he said quietly. "How do you explain that, Veltar?" "She is a demon sent to test our faith," Veltar replied. "Or perhaps she has stolen the knowledge somehow. But her story is impossible. Humans did not have space travel 50,000 years ago. Everyone knows they are a young species." Elena shook her head. "That is what we thought too. But the tablets prove otherwise. I have pictures, recordings, translations. I can show you everything." "Show us lies," another council member called out. "Show us tricks and false evidence." Kethmer stood up slowly. "Enough." His voice carried authority that made the others fall silent. "If this human speaks truth, then we must know it. If she speaks lies, we must prove it. Either way, we will investigate her claims." He looked directly at Elena. "You say you have evidence of these ancient humans. Where is it?" "On my ship," Elena said. "The tablets, the translations, all of it. But there is more. I believe there are records in your own temples that will support what I am telling you." "What kind of records?" Kethmer asked. Elena thought carefully before answering. She had to be careful here. "Your holy books speak of the time when the gods first gave you the first tongue. They described the divine messengers who came from the sky. But what if those were not gods? What if they were the human explorers I found evidence of?" The reaction was immediate. Half the council jumped to their feet, shouting in outrage. Veltar pointed an accusing finger at Elena. "She mocks our most sacred beliefs. This is beyond blasphemy." But Kethmer was thinking. Elena could see it in his eyes. He was a scholar as well as a priest, and scholars had to follow evidence wherever it led. "The ancient texts do describe the divine messengers," he said slowly. "They say the gods came in silver ships that blazed across the sky. They taught us writing and numbers and the movements of the stars." "Yes," Elena said. "Just like human explorers would do when meeting a primitive species. They would share knowledge and try to establish communication." "But the texts also say the divine ones were tall and beautiful, with skin like starlight," Veltar protested. "Not like humans at all." Elena smiled sadly. To people who had never seen visitors from another world, anyone with advanced technology would seem divine. And descriptions change over thousands of years of retelling. Stories grow. Details get added or changed. It happens with all oral histories. Kethmer was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision that shocked everyone in the chamber. "I will examine this evidence myself," he said. "If the human speaks truth, we must know it. If she speaks lies, I will expose them." "High Priest," Veltar said urgently, "you cannot seriously consider—" "I can and I will," Kethmer cut him off. "Our faith should not fear the truth. If our beliefs are correct, then no evidence can shake them. If they are not—" He paused. "Then we deserve to know." The next day, Kethmer came to Elena's ship along with 2 other priests. Elena led them to her small laboratory where she had spread out photographs of the tablets and pages of her translations. Kethmer studied everything in silence. He could read the ancient language better than Elena had expected, and she watched his face change as he worked through her evidence. "This journal," he said finally, pointing to the translation of the white stone tablet. "The author describes our ancestors. The way they lived, the way they spoke. These details, they match our oldest historical records exactly." Elena nodded. The human explorer was writing down what he saw. He had no reason to lie in his personal journal. But here, Kethmer pointed to another section, he mentions teaching your people the blessing words and the ritual forms. These are exact phrases from our most sacred ceremonies. "Which makes sense if those ceremonies came from the humans," Elena said gently, one of the other priests. A younger male named Doreen spoke up. "High Priest, there is something else. The star charts in these tablets, they show the location of our homeworld perfectly. But they also show the location of Earth. The distances are correct. The stellar positions match our modern astronomical data. Kethmar looked at the star charts for a long time. 50,000 years ago, our people barely understood fire. How would they know the exact positions of distant stars? Elena said nothing. She could see him working through the logic, following the evidence to its inevitable conclusion. Finally, Kethmar set down the papers and looked at Elena. If this is true, and I'm beginning to believe it is, then everything we have believed about our history is wrong. Not wrong, Elena said carefully. Just incomplete. Your people did receive knowledge from visitors from the sky. They did learn a new language that expanded their understanding. But those visitors were not gods. They were explorers from Earth. Explorers who left when disease struck their expedition, Doreen added, reading from the journal translation. Just like the ancient texts say the divine ones disappeared suddenly. Kethmar stood up and walked to the ship's small window, looking out at the stars. Do you understand what this means? He asked quietly. Our entire religion is based on the idea that we are the chosen people, that the gods selected us alone to receive their sacred language. Elena joined him at the window. But you were chosen? The human explorers chose to share their knowledge with your ancestors instead of exploiting them or ignoring them. They chose to create a common language so both species could communicate. That shows how special your people were, even 50,000 years ago. It also means, Kethmar said slowly, that humans and Zephyrians have been connected for much longer than either species remembered. We are not strangers meeting for the first time. We are old friends who forgot each other. Elena felt a chill as she realized the full implications of the discovery. If humans had been exploring this region of space 50,000 years ago, then human history was far more complex than anyone had imagined. There might be other worlds where ancient humans had left their mark. Other species they had contacted. High Priest, she said quietly. This changes things for my people too. We thought we were new to space travel. But if these tablets are right, humans have been explorers for much longer than we ever dreamed. Kethmar turned away from the window. We must return to the temple. I need to study our oldest records again, knowing what I know now. If the truth is what you say it is, then my people deserve to hear it, even if it destroys their faith? Elena asked. Kethmar picked up his staff and headed for the door. Faith that cannot survive truth was never real faith to begin with, he said. And besides, this truth is more wonderful than any lie. It means we were never alone. It means the universe is full of friends we just have not remembered yet. As they left the ship together, Elena wondered if the rest of the Zephyrian High Council would see it that way. Something told her that the hardest part of this journey was just beginning. The news spread through the Zephyrian capital like wildfire. Within hours of Kethmar's return from Elena's ship, every temple on the planet was buzzing with whispered conversations. By the next morning, the streets were filled with protesters. Elena watched from her detention cell as crowds gathered outside the Grand Temple. Some carried signs demanding her immediate execution. Others held banners calling for truth and investigation. The two groups faced each other across the wide stone plaza, their voices rising in anger. Kethmar came to see her just before sunset. His usually perfect robes were wrinkled, and Elena could see exhaustion in his eyes. It is worse than I expected, he said, settling into the chair across from her. The Grand Hierarch has declared your findings to be absolute heresy. He has forbidden anyone from discussing them or examining your evidence. Elena nodded. She had met the Grand Hierarch briefly during her trial. He was an ancient Zephyrian, older than anyone else on the High Council, and completely rigid in his thinking. What about the other priests? She asked. Split down the middle, Kethmar replied. The older ones stand with the Hierarch. They say faith requires no evidence, only belief. But many of the younger priests want to study your tablets. They ask questions I cannot answer without revealing what we discovered. Through the window, Elena could hear the protesters getting louder. Someone was giving a speech, though she could not make out the words. Doreen is with the progressives, Kethmer continued, along with about 20 other junior priests. They have been studying our oldest records just as I have. They are finding connections everywhere. What kind of connections? Elena asked. Kethmer pulled out a datapad and showed her a photograph of an ancient stone carving. This is from our oldest temple, carved over 40,000 years ago. Look at the figures in the background. Elena studied the image. Most of the carvings showed typical Zephyrian religious scenes, priests performing ceremonies, people bringing offerings. But in the corners were smaller figures that looked different. They were shorter than the Zephyrians, with different proportions. They could be humans, Elena said slowly. That is what we thought. And here, Kethmer swiped to another image. This is from a temple on the other side of the planet. Same time period. This carving showed what appeared to be a ceremony. Tall Zephyrian figures knelt before shorter ones who seemed to be teaching them something. The shorter figures held objects that could have been books or tablets. There are dozens of these carvings, Kethmer said. We always assumed the smaller figures were stylized representations of ancient Zephyrians. But now you think they might be accurate depictions of humans, Elena finished. It gets more interesting. Doreen found genetic records in our medical archives. Very old ones from when our scientists first mapped Zephyrian DNA. There are sequences that do not match anything else in our evolutionary chain. Foreign genetic material that somehow got into our bloodline thousands of generations ago. Elena's eyes widened. Interbreeding? Perhaps. Or medical intervention by the human explorers. Your people might have tried to help ours fight diseases or genetic defects. The records are too old and incomplete to be certain. Outside, the shouting was getting louder. Elena could now make out individual words. One group was chanting "Death to the blasphemer," while another responded with "Truth above tradition." Kethmer looked worried. The situation is becoming dangerous. The Grand Hierarch has called for a formal trial of heresy. Not just for you, but for any priest who supports your findings. Including you? Elena asked. Especially me. I am the one who examined your evidence. The one who spoke publicly about its validity. Kethmer set down his datapad and looked directly at Elena. But I have made my choice. Truth is more important than my position or even my life. Before Elena could respond, the door to her cell burst open. 3 temple guards rushed in, their weapons drawn. Behind them came Veltar, the second priest who had been so angry during the trial. High Priest Kethmer, Veltar said formally. By order of the Grand Hierarch, you are commanded to appear before the council immediately. You are charged with heresy and corruption of faith. Kethmer stood slowly, his dignity intact despite the circumstances. I will come willingly, he said. Then he looked at Elena. Remember what I told you about truth being more important than tradition? Some of us still believe that. As they led Kethmer away, Elena heard new sounds from outside. These were not protesters anymore. These were the sounds of violence, breaking glass, screaming, the clash of weapons. An hour later, Doreen appeared at her cell door. His robes were torn and there was blue blood on his face from a cut above his eye. Dr. Vasquez, he said urgently, we must get you out of here. The conservative faction has declared holy war against the progressives. They are arresting anyone who questions the traditional teachings. What about Kethmer? Elena asked as Doreen worked on the lock of her cell. Under arrest. The Grand Hierarch has charged him with the ultimate heresy, denying the divine nature of the first tongue. Doreen got the lock open and gestured for Elena to follow him. But the younger priests are not giving up. We have taken control of the Archive Temple on the east side of the city. They moved quickly through corridors that Elena had never seen before. Doreen led her down maintenance passages and through storage areas, avoiding the main halls where conservative guards might be patrolling. Why are you doing this? Elena asked as they climbed a narrow staircase. Why risk your lives for information that threatens your religion? Doreen paused at a door and listened for sounds from the other side. Because it does not threaten our religion, he said quietly. It makes it bigger, better, More amazing? How can you say that? Everything I discovered contradicts your core beliefs. No, Doreen said, opening the door and checking the hallway beyond. It contradicts our assumptions about our core beliefs. The truth is that we were chosen to receive knowledge from travelers from the stars. The truth is that we were considered worthy of friendship and education by an advanced species. The truth is that our ancestors were remarkable enough to earn respect from beings who came from another world. They stepped into the hallway and hurried toward an exit Elena had not seen before. For thousands of years, Doreen continued, we believed we were special because God spoke to us in a divine language. Now we learn that we were special because real people from another world talking to, which is more amazing, being chosen by mythical beings or being chosen by real ones. Elena had to admit that he had a point. They reached the exit and found themselves in an alley behind the temple complex. In the distance, Elena could see smoke rising from several parts of the city. The sound of conflict echoed off the buildings. Where are we going? Elena asked. To the archive temple, Doreen replied. We have your evidence there, and we are going through every ancient record we can find. If we are right about the connection between our species, there should be more proof in our oldest documents. And if you find that proof? Doreen smiled, despite the blood on his face and the danger they were in. Then we are going to change history for both our peoples. We are going to prove that humans and Zephyrians are not strangers meeting for the first time. We are family reunited after 50,000 years apart. As they made their way through the burning city, Elena wondered if the truth they were seeking would be worth the price both species might have to pay for it. The archive temple was unlike any building Elena had ever seen. Ancient beyond measure, its walls were carved from a single massive crystal that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Inside, thousands of stone tablets lined the walls from floor to ceiling, each one a piece of Zephyrian history. Doreen led Elena through halls filled with young priests working frantically. They sat surrounded by piles of tablets, their translation devices glowing as they worked to decode texts that had not been read for centuries. We have been here for 3 days, Doreen explained as they walked. Ever since the violence began, the progressive faction has taken refuge here while we search for additional evidence. They entered a central chamber where Elena saw familiar faces. About 30 Zephyrian priests sat in circles, some she recognized from the trial. They looked up as she entered, their expressions mixing hope and desperation. Dr. Vasquez, one of them, called out. Please help us understand these symbols. We think we have found something important, but the language is too archaic for our translation programs. Elena knelt beside the priest and looked at the tablet he was studying. The symbols were indeed old, carved in a style that predated everything else she had seen in Zephyrian writing. But as she studied them, she realized they were not purely Zephyrian at all. This is a mixed language, she said slowly. Part ancient Zephyrian, part something else, something that looks like. She paused, hardly believing what she was seeing. Like proto-human cuneiform, what does it say? Doreen asked urgently. Elena worked through the symbols carefully. The tablet was clearly very important. It was larger than most others, made of precious materials, and the carving was extremely precise. It is a treaty, she said finally. An agreement between the Sky Travelers and the people of the Crystal Caves? The Sky Travelers agree to share knowledge of writing, numbers, and star wisdom. The people of the caves agree to help the Sky Travelers find safe harbor and healing for their sick. The room fell completely silent. There is more, Elena continued. The Sky Travelers promise to return when the people of the caves have grown wise enough to travel between stars themselves. And the people of the caves promise to preserve the shared language until that day comes. She looked up at the faces around her. This is not just a historical document. It is a promise between our species, a promise that we would meet again someday. Doreen sat down heavily. 50,000 years later, and we finally kept that promise. Suddenly, the great doors of the archive temple burst open. Conservative guards poured in, followed by the Grand Hierarch himself. The ancient Zephyrian's robes blazed with religious symbols, and his staff was crowned with crystals that burned like stars. "Seize the heretics," he commanded, "all of them. The human most of all." But before the guards could move, another voice echoed through the chamber. "Stop!" Everyone turned. Kethmar walked through the doorway, but he was not alone. Behind him came dozens of Zephyrians, not just priests, but ordinary citizens. Young and old, rich and poor, they filled the chamber until it was packed with people. The Grand Hierarch stared in shock. "High Priest Kethmar, you are under arrest for heresy." "How dare you? How dare I speak truth?" Kethmar interrupted. "How dare I follow evidence wherever it leads? Grand Hierarch, look around you. These people are not here because I commanded them. They are here because they have heard the real story and they want to know more." Elena realized that word had spread far beyond the temples. The entire city now knew about her discovery, and many Zephyrians were choosing truth over comfortable lies. Kethmar walked to the center of the chamber and raised his staff. "Grand Hierarch, I challenge you to formal debate. Let all these people hear both sides of this question. Let them decide for themselves what to believe." The Grand Hierarch's face twisted with anger, but Elena could see he was trapped. In Zephyrian culture, no priest could refuse a challenge to formal debate, especially not in front of so many witnesses. "Very well," the old priest said. "But when your heretical theories collapse under examination, you will accept the traditional punishment for blasphemy." "And if I prove my case," Kethmar replied, "you will accept that our understanding of our history must change." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Elena watched as Kethmar presented tablet after tablet, carving after carving, genetic record after genetic record. He showed the linguistic connections, the astronomical accuracy of ancient star charts, the archaeological evidence from Kepler 442c. The Grand Hierarch countered with religious texts and traditional interpretations. He spoke of faith and the danger of questioning divine truth. But Elena could see that the crowd was not convinced. They wanted evidence, not just assertion. Finally, Kethmar played his strongest card. He brought out the treaty tablet that Elena had just translated and read it aloud in both the ancient, mixed language and modern Zephyrian. When he finished, the chamber was absolutely silent. Then one person started clapping. Then another. Soon the entire crowd was applauding and many were crying. Elena saw wonder and joy on their faces, not fear or anger. The Grand Hierarch stood alone among his guards, looking suddenly very old and very tired. "The people have chosen," Kethmar said gently. "Not heresy, but expanded truth? Not the destruction of faith, but its evolution." The Grand Hierarch looked around at the faces surrounding him. Slowly he set down his staff. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "it is time for this old priest to learn some new truths." 6 months later, Elena stood before the Zephyrian assembly, not as a prisoner this time, but as an honored guest. The ceremony was being broadcast across the galaxy, watched by billions of humans and Zephyrians alike. Ket at single quote more, now elevated to Grand Hierarch after the old one's peaceful retirement, stepped forward with a crystal tablet in his hands. The symbols carved into it glowed with soft blue light. "Dr. Elena Vasquez," he said formally, "in recognition of your discovery of the ancient bond between our peoples, and in fulfillment of the promise made 50,000 years ago, I grant you the title of Bridge Speaker. You are the first non-Zephyrian to hold religious rank in our society, and the first human to be recognized as a keeper of the sacred languages." Elena accepted the tablet, feeling its warmth in her hands. Around the assembly hall, humans and Zephyrians sat together, no longer strangers but rediscovered family. "The ancient treaty has been fulfilled," she said, speaking in the mixed language that both species could now understand. "The sky travelers and the people of the crystal caves meet again, but this time both our peoples can travel between the stars." The applause was thunderous. Later, at the celebration, Elena found herself talking with a group of young Zephyrians who were planning to study on Earth. They wanted to learn about human archaeology, to search for more evidence of the ancient connection between their species. "Dr. Vasquez," one of them asked, "do you think we will find other worlds where our ancestors met?" Elena smiled as she looked up at the stars through the great crystal dome above them. I think the galaxy is full of friends we just have not remembered yet. And I think our real adventure is just beginning. Kethmore joined them, carrying 2 cups of the traditional celebration drink. He handed one to Elena. "A toast," he said, "to the truth that sets us free and to the bonds that distance cannot break." They drank together as the stars wheeled overhead, ancient lights that had witnessed the first meeting of humans and Zephyrians and now shone down on their reunion. Tomorrow, joint exploration fleets would begin searching for other traces of humanity's forgotten past among the stars. But tonight, 2 old friends celebrated finding each other again after 50,000 years of separation. The galaxy suddenly seemed much smaller and much more welcoming than either species had ever dared to hope.